The View studio was already tense before the cameras turned on. Not chaotic, not loud, just tense in the way that happens when everyone in the room knows something might go wrong, and no one's sure who will pull the trigger. Jasmine Crockett was scheduled to appear as a guest. It had been pitched as a discussion about young voices in politics, the next generation of leadership. But that was just the version the public saw. Behind the scenes, there were emails, conditions, and warnings. Jasmine Crockett had only agreed to appear if the conversation stayed substantive. That meant no personal attacks, no condescending treatment, and no attempts to turn her into a caricature for the host's amusement. The View's producers had agreed. Or at least they said they had. But just minutes before they walked onto the set, one of the producers changed the segment structure. And Jasmine noticed the trap being set. When she finally stepped onto the stage, the applause was loud and automatic. People were clapping for politics as entertainment, not knowing what was coming. Jasmine waved to the crowd once, then sat. The hosts were already smiling, too tightly. Whoopi leaned forward first. Whoopi said, "Welcome Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, one of the more vocal members of the House." Already, the framing. Jasmine caught it, but kept her composure. She said, "I prefer effective to vocal, Whoopi. But thanks for having me." The audience chuckled. Joy Behar jumped in quickly. Joy said, "Well, you've certainly been effective at getting attention. Some of your speeches have gone viral. But are you getting actual work done, or is it all for show?" Jasmine's eyes narrowed slightly. She said, "I've co-sponsored 12 bills this session." "How many bills have you sponsored, Joy?" The audience reacted. Some laughed nervously. Sunny Hostin intervened. She said, "Let's not get defensive." Jasmine cut her off. She said, "Pointing out facts isn't defensive. Starting an interview by questioning my effectiveness is offensive." The atmosphere shifted. This wasn't going according to their plan. Sarah Haynes tried a different approach. She said, "I think what we're trying to understand is how someone so young navigates Washington. The same way anyone navigates it," Jasmine interrupted. "With intelligence, determination, and refusing to be patronized." Alyssa Farah Griffin, the conservative host, chimed in. She said, "But you have to admit, your generation seems more interested in Twitter clapbacks than actual governance." Jasmine turned to face her. She said, "My generation? We're trying to fix the mess your generation created. Climate change, wealth inequality, systemic racism, all problems you've had decades to solve." Joy's tone turned sharp. She said, "Oh please, every generation thinks they invented activism." "No," Jasmine said firmly. "We just perfected it. Because we had to. Because you all failed." Whoopi's voice hardened. She said, "That's quite disrespectful to people who've been fighting these fights since before you were born." Jasmine's composure started cracking. She said, "You know what's disrespectful? Inviting me here to talk about young leadership, then spending the entire time dismissing me because of my age." Sunny tried to interject. "Nobody's dismissing you." That's when Jasmine stood up. Not slowly, not for effect, just suddenly. She said, "You've done nothing but dismiss me since I sat down. My voice is too loud. My methods are just for show. My generation doesn't understand real work. I've heard this all before." Joy stood too, her face reddening. She said, "If you can't handle tough questions." "Tough questions?" Jasmine's voice rose. "You call these tough questions? These are insults disguised as questions. This is 5 women ganging up on one guest and calling it an interview." The audience went completely silent. Now, before we witness what happened next in this explosive confrontation, I need to tell you something. What you're about to see is exactly why mainstream media doesn't want you to know these stories exist. They bury them, edit them, pretend they never happened. But we're here exposing the truth they desperately want hidden. If you believe in real, unfiltered truth, if you're tired of being fed sanitized versions of events, then hit that subscribe button right now. Don't wait until the end, because what's coming next will blow your mind. Subscribe now and join the thousands who refuse to be lied to anymore. Trust me, after you see what Jasmine does next, you'll understand why they tried so hard to make this disappear. Whoopi's voice turned cold. She said, "Nobody's ganging up on you. You're being paranoid." That's when Jasmine exploded. She said, "Paranoid? Paranoid? You bring me on this show under false pretenses, attack me from 5 different angles, and when I defend myself, I'm paranoid." Her voice filled the studio, raw with anger. "You want to know what this really is? You can't stand that someone like me doesn't need your validation. You can't stand that a young black woman might actually be more effective than you've ever been. You can't stand that the future doesn't look like you." Alyssa tried to interrupt. "That's completely—" "I'm not finished," Jasmine shouted. "For years, this show has done this. Bringing on young women, especially young black women, to tear them down, to put them in their place, to remind them they should be grateful just to be here." She turned to the audience. "You want to see what's wrong with feminism? It's right here. Older women gatekeeping younger women. White women telling black women how to act. Everyone policing everyone else instead of fighting the real enemy." Some audience members started clapping. Others looked shocked. Sarah Haynes said weakly, "I think you're misunderstanding." "No," Jasmine said. "I understand perfectly. This isn't Hot Topics. This is hazing. This is, let's put the uppity young congresswoman in her place." Joy's voice turned nasty. She said, "If you don't like how we do things, you can leave." Jasmine laughed bitterly. She said, "Oh, I'm leaving. But first, let me tell you something. You've become everything you claim to fight against. Mean girls with a bigger platform. Bullies with better vocabulary." She grabbed her notes from the table. "You want to know why your ratings are dropping? Because women are tired of watching other women tear each other down. We're tired of the internalized misogyny. We're tired of you." Whoopi stood up, her famous composure cracking. She said, "Get off our stage." Now, Jasmine was already walking but turned back for one final shot. She said, "Your stage? That's the problem right there. You think you own the conversation, but we're taking it back. The young women you try to diminish? We're coming. And we don't need your permission." She looked directly at the camera. "To every young woman watching, you don't need their approval. You don't need to dim your light to make them comfortable. Shine anyway. Speak anyway. Let anyway." She walked off. The audience erupted. Some cheered, some booed, complete chaos. The host stood there, completely thrown. And what happened next would become the most explosive moment in The View's history. After Jasmine's exit, the studio descended into chaos. The five hosts stood at their table, trying to process what had just happened. The audience was divided, some standing and applauding Jasmine's exit, others looking uncomfortable, many recording on their phones. Joy tried to fill the void. She said, "Well, I guess some people can't handle." She was cut off by audience members shouting. Someone yelled, "She was right." Another voice called out, "You were bullying her." Whoopi tried to restore order. She said, ladies, let's all calm down." A woman in the audience stood up. She said, "No, we won't calm down. We just watched 5 grown women attack a young congresswoman. That wasn't an interview. That was an ambush." More audience members joined in. The carefully screened View audience was in full revolt. Someone shouted, "This is why women can't unite." Another yelled, "You owe her an apology." Sunny's mask completely dropped. She said, "If you don't like the show, nobody's forcing you to watch." That made it worse. Some people actually started leaving. Meanwhile, backstage, Jasmine was supposed to exit immediately, but she didn't. She stood in the hallway, hands shaking with rage, as crew members approached her. A female producer said quietly, "That was long overdue. They do this to every strong young woman who comes on." A camera operator added, "Especially women of color. You're just the first to fight back that hard." Jasmine looked at them, tears of anger in her eyes. She said, "I came here to talk about legislation, about helping people, and they turned it into a hazing ritual." Back on stage, the hosts had cut to commercial early, but the damage was spreading. When they returned, they tried to continue with Hot Topics, but the audience's energy had completely shifted. Audience members kept interrupting. Someone called out, "Address what just happened." Another shouted, "Stop pretending everything's normal." Joy snapped, "Security, remove anyone who can't behave." That caused more uproar. The remaining segment was a disaster. Within minutes of Jasmine's exit, the footage was everywhere. But it wasn't just the confrontation, it was the raw truth of her words. The calling out of patterns everyone had seen, but few had named. Hashtag Jasmine Crockett was right started trending before the show even ended. Jasmine, still in the parking lot, posted a video on Instagram. No script, no filter, just truth. She said, "I didn't go on The View to make a scene. I went to discuss issues affecting my constituents. But when you're treated like a child instead of a congresswoman, when your achievements are dismissed before you even speak, When you're set up to be the angry black woman for their entertainment, sometimes you have to choose dignity over decorum. She paused, steadying herself. To every young woman who's been told you're too much, too loud, too ambitious, you're not. You're exactly what this world needs. Don't let anyone, especially other women, dim your light because it exposes their insecurities. The video had 15 million views in 3 hours. The View tried to address it in their next segment, with Whoopi calling Jasmine disrespectful and unable to have adult conversation. That made everything worse. More clips spread. The hashtag evolved to hashtag The View is the problem. Other politicians started sharing their own experiences. Stories poured out about being belittled, talked over, and dismissed on the show. A pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "Been there. They invite you on to discuss policy, then make it about your age, your tone, your right to speak." At Jasmine for US said what we've all wanted to say. Senator Katie Porter added, "The View claims to support women but consistently tears down young female leaders. Thank you at Jasmine for US for your courage." Within 48 hours, The View had lost 2 major sponsors, not from organized boycotts, but from brands recognizing the toxicity. But the real impact was deeper. Jasmine's outburst had exposed something that had been festering for years, the way certain shows used the guise of women's empowerment to actually enforce outdated hierarchies. A week later, Jasmine appeared on another show to discuss what happened. She was calm, thoughtful, reflective. She said, "I'm not proud that I yelled, but I'm not ashamed either. Sometimes rage is the appropriate response to disrespect. Sometimes the composure they demand is just complicity in disguise." The host asked, "Would you go back?" Jasmine thought for a moment. She said, "I'd go on any show that wants to have real conversation. But I won't be anyone's punching bag. Not anymore." The View's ratings took a significant hit. Younger viewers especially tuned out. The hosts tried to bring on other young politicians to prove they weren't biased, but many declined. 3 months later, at a women's conference, Jasmine and Whoopi crossed paths. Witnesses said Whoopi tried to approach her, perhaps to make peace. Jasmine walked past her without acknowledgement. Later, when asked about it, she said simply, "I said everything I needed to say on their stage. They heard me. They just didn't listen." The footage of her walkout became a rallying cry for young women in politics and beyond, not as an example of losing control, but as a case study in maintaining self-respect. Young women, especially young women of color, began sharing the clip with a simple message: no more. No more smiling through disrespect. No more being grateful for platforms that diminish you. No more letting other women police your voice. Jasmine Crockett didn't just walk off a stage that night. She walked away from a system that expected her to be grateful for its contempt. And in doing so, she gave permission to millions who'd been told their anger wasn't ladylike, their ambition too threatening, their presence too much. The revolution wasn't polite. It wasn't measured. It was a young woman saying enough and meaning it.